Do it.
All right, cool.
I think we're on.
Hello, everyone that is following us from the Urban Files, and I hope that you're having a great Independence Day. Again, here at the Urban Files, we try to break down all things cities, traveling to them, visiting them,
Do it.
relocating within them, and everything that they encompass.
Yeah. So we are hitting, it's July now, and we're hitting peak summer travel. So I know I just got back, kind of, if you call it back. I just kind of wrapped up a 1 month stint on the West Coast, and we can get to that another time. But I know, Chuck, you also just returned from a big trip.
Yes, yes. And I was actually in the Northeast, kind of on the opposite side of the country. I was in Boston, Massachusetts, and Burlington, Vermont. And those were kind of on either end of actually being there for my brother in law's wedding. So, congratulations to Brandon and Hannah. I hope you guys had a wonderful time and congratulations.
Yeah, so congratulations. What are your initial thoughts from your time up in New England?
Yeah, so it was really, perception altering in just how much I enjoyed these places. And I've always been someone that really has enjoyed cities, and that's domestically and internationally, but it's been as much international travel as we've been blessed to do in the last few years. We really haven't done that much domestically. And it was probably my first time in New England in almost a decade. And so Burlington is one of those kind of small hippie cities. Not that I consider myself a hippie, but I kind of idealized it because it was in a beautiful setting. Kind of the geography, for those not familiar with it, its nickname is New England's West Coast. And so Vermont and New York's border is Lake Champlain at the west. And Lake Champlain is actually the sixth largest freshwater lake within the United States after the five Great Lakes. And so you have that there, and it's pretty broad and an expanse over the city. And the city itself is relatively hilly, kind of overlooking this prominence. And then on either side of you, within about maybe 20 to 40 miles, depending on which range we're talking, to the east, you have the Green Mountains of Vermont, which you have high peaks going that way. And then looking out over the lake, officially like in the background for any sunrise or sunset shots that you might see there, you're seeing the Adirondack Mountains. So you have two mountain ranges kind of forming a valley with this lake. So it's just a gorgeous place. And then, what you see behind me is actually Church Street Marketplace in Vermont. And it is one of the signature pedestrian spaces and pedestrian malls that are officially, there's no cars that are able to drive on them in probably the entire US and North America. And
Uh,
it is fantastic. We actually were lucky enough to be there for the tail end of the Burlington Jazz Festival, which is very interesting because, we saw some places where people are just kind of sitting there mellow and watching performers, and one where the entire street was dancing, and that was that block. So that was a pretty cool scene. And Burlington is small. It probably just became my favorite small MSA, which I classify as under 250,000 in the entire US, because it has that kind of cosmopolitan feel. You have big box shopping, you have nightlife, you have activity, and it's a college town, but you also just have really gorgeous, bucolic surrounding getting in there, where basically I had taken off from where the wedding was, and much of the 3 hours that we spent driving was almost entirely undeveloped bucolic forest. And I think in some extent that almost kind of added to the experience of actually getting to this oasis of development, in a sense that it was not like our American pattern is for so often, where it's sprawl and centered towards cars and continuation of developments, but instead it's just this core compact, relatively high density city for its size. I think it's only about 40, 50,000, but the business density downtown, but it really has an immense charm and character, and just has a really cool scene all around to it that really was fantastic to me.
Sounds amazing. Can you scoot to the side so we can see this mall
Yes.
more clearly?
Actually,
Where?
if you look here, guys, you can see here pretty much the whole mall, and by block basis. And what was interesting is they used brick throughout, and I think that was kind of a traffic calming measure here. Over on the left, as you see my shoulder blade disappear and reappear a bit. But I was talking to my wife about it, and the big thing was like, there's so much pedestrian space in Burlington that you almost forget that you have to look for traffic occasionally when you're kind of going between some of the city blocks and corridors and stuff like that. So that was interesting. And we were able to actually go ahead and walk down to the waterfront there. And that was just to give you the idea of what I was seeing. This is what it looked like. And it was, I mean, I'm not even sure this picture really does it justice.
Right.
It starts to, but it's really a splendid place.
Gotcha. Yeah, the greenery, the water, mountains in the distance. It sounds sort of ideal from a natural aesthetic.
Yeah. And not to get into politics too much, because I really try to avoid that. But I know, of course, Bernie Sanders was the mayor here. And I think regardless of where you come down politically, one of the best things he probably did during his mayoral tenure here, apparently the water around Burlington was somewhat filthy, and he made it an intentional initiative to clean it up and really have this area be kind of a development hub for ecotourism. Because Burlington is one of those cool cities, I guess, like the hipster kind of scene, but I don't know that it's always been that way. It's really been somewhere I've been hearing about from friends and colleagues and stuff in about the last decade.
Gotcha. Yeah, I didn't know about that. So that sounds awesome. In addition to Burlington, obviously that had an impression on you. Where else did you go?
Yes. So the other part of my trip, and we went to a number of different places in New England, but one of the big ones, obviously, is kind of the capital of both Massachusetts and New England in a sense. We went to Boston. And I think because of our planning and efficiency, my wife, her brother went to college in Boston. And so she visited him probably 6 or 7 times. And so, I mean, she had kind of gotten her fill in a sense. But, I could have been happy just staying there even for 2 or 3 or more days, just because it's an awesome city to walk around. But I think beyond just having that continuous human scale that you have in Burlington, it's able to be brought out so much more with the transit network. And I mean, the MBTA probably has its share of critics. I've heard especially a lot of complaints about the green line with things stopping or going slow. But let me tell you, from someone coming in Tampa Bay, you basically look like Seoul or Tokyo compared to what I am used to on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So cherish it and appreciate it for what it is in America. It's
yeah. I mean, the counterpoint is that when you're living there, you want things to be as good as they can be, and so it's fair to advocate for improvements. Where
absolutely yes.
So yeah, just because you're not Tampa doesn't mean that.
That is fair.
but yeah, that said, I totally understand what you're saying. I felt the same way. With San Francisco, it gets beat up a lot, but it certainly, and it has its warts. But San Francisco transit is certainly very, very comprehensive.
You could definitely do worse. I guess that's the idea. Yeah. So it was awesome, and it really made me wonder. I think we were even, when I was coming back from the Red Sox stadium in the evening on the way back from the game, because we did that to end our night, and it was like, what would it actually be like to live in a place where this is what your regular existence looks like? I mean, just this is Back Bay for those that are somewhat familiar in Boston. This is Commonwealth Ave, but really just that ability to not have a car and be able to live that way. Like I think honestly, we can speak to the game or the sites or whatever, but for me, figuring out the transit and then just using it and getting from one end of Cambridge to over on Fenway Park, we took the red line over to Park Street, which is the oldest station in North America, as a fun fact there. But and then we took the green line into the stadium over to Copley. Of course, we had to walk through Back Bay and stuff, but it really, I mean, the biggest thing I thought about was like, I was in Miami for a Heat game a few months ago, and we ended up paying $50 to park right near the arena. And gosh, I mean, like it was a great time, and we really enjoyed it. And the city of Miami does have somewhat of a transit network, but that's we basically paid $250 each way for a long round trip pass, and instead of $50, we're talking $5 spent. That's a lot of money that you can either just save, as because that's important, or just like use it at the concessions and maybe get something outside of the arena on your way, and really just that you get to engage with the area around you. It's not, if you have better transit, I think it also means better walking, and I think that shows up here.
Yeah, for sure. I have an interrupter at the moment.
Yeah.
My thought.
I wonder if there's someone from Boston complaining about me saying their transit was too good.
So I think this just brings up something in my mind that I want to clarify, and that I don't think you, and I certainly wouldn't be, complaining about the parking price as so much as we are complaining that there aren't better options for you available in Miami. Because I do personally think that the price of parking, when it's high in a downtown area like that, is totally justified. And It's not so much that is an issue, but that there should be multiple different options for people trying to get to a stadium, a place where with very high capacity crowd. You really should have many different options for people.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing. Like it's parking is really just a reflection of supply and demand. So if the team or the city or whatever owns that space and they're going to charge that for it and people will pay it, that's just market demand right there. But obviously I think things are going to be affected by like, can you actually get into this place or not? I think the most egregious instances are probably where you have those big suburban parking lot stadiums. Like obviously the Panthers are an exception because they got a mall right next door, so you can be a cheapskate and cut over there. But like the Dolphins, or like even in downtown LA, I can't think, I know you technically can walk from downtown LA to Chavez Ravine, but I've heard it's just really a not good experience. So I think that's the big thing that needs to be said there, is that if you have that, it not only would it potentially eradicate some of those parking costs potentially for people that are upset about those, but you also are going to have people that don't want to sit in traffic for an hour after the game, or they don't want to like they just don't want the stress of driving down there, because I mean, Boston is notorious as being one of the worst or more stressful cities in the US to drive in. So why not, if you have a good option available, have that ability to take it and, burn calories on the way? I mean, like I smashed my step goals every single day this trip, and it didn't even really feel like I was doing anything.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're like you said, you're coming from a suburban area, suburban part of the Tampa region.
Yes.
So not only are you in the Tampa area, but you're in a particularly sort of suburban slash rural almost
Oh
section,
yeah.
you know, and so uh, for, for for the senses and for sort of the pedestrian scale, Boston's going to be a whole different world. And
Oh
so
yeah.
I'm glad that you enjoyed it. I'm not surprised, but I guess that kind of leads me into wondering how that very different experience um, affected you, considering where you come from and how you reflect on where you want to be in the coming years.
Yeah. And I think that's I saw a thing on Not Just Bikes about this, about like how they didn't want their kid to be raised in the suburbs because basically then until they're 17 or 16 when they get a driver's license, they literally can't go anywhere on their own. And I think there are car-free options that exist in Tampa Bay. I think it's good to see the bus rapid transit line opening in St. Pete. It would be good if they could extend some of the existing streetcar system there, but there's not a lot, and it definitely it opens my eyes to what type of area could I live in that would have more opportunity for that, whether it's a college town or potentially living in a bigger city. I know one of the challenges in America is you don't really have a supply. Going back to that supply and demand and parking argument, we don't really have a large supply of urban neighborhoods compared to much of the rest of the world. And so the ones, especially in like the Sun Belt, I think are relatively speaking at a premium, where a middle class person can't necessarily get into there. But it definitely makes me want to structure my life somehow in a way that I could have more opportunities to pursue things in that sense. I mean, I think even going deeper, like I think you know, you look at longevity and lifespan, and I think people that walk and take transit places, most of the, Europe and Japan and all that, they live longer, and that's not an accident. I mean, I think that can at least partially be attributed to the fact that people are kind of in their daily life and the way things are built. They don't just go from their car to building to car to building. It's having that interactive experience with the environment.
Yeah. Well, since you brought this is not where I was going to go, but since you brought up the lifespan, um, one thing that has come up recently has been sort of sort of an increase in crime in cities in America, and sort of the narrative that our cities are becoming more dangerous again during the pandemic. And what's interesting is that the data tells us that while that is true, cities, our urban centers, our big cities especially, are still far, far safer than the other places. And
Yes.
and that's due in large part to what you're talking about, mobility, and the fact that in most places when you're car dependent, there's just a far higher risk than there is when you're getting around by walking or by transit.
Yeah, and I think I'm not sure if I know exactly the video or article you're referencing, but it
There's
was one basically saying that New York City is safer than your small town. And basically what it does is it looks at homicide rates, but it also looks at driving fatalities. It looks at some of the other ways that you could potentially be seriously maimed or injured or killed if you were not just going to do it from health causes like, heart disease or cancer, et cetera. And it came up pretty consistently that the big cities were statistically safer than their non-suburban counterparts. And I think it's kind of I want to say maybe kind of a wordsmithing of or manipulation of the data, because I hear things like this, and I'm not saying that there aren't problems to be acknowledged, but when we hear that a crime rate in a city rose 40% and there it rose 40% in 1 year, and so it's getting more dangerous now. That's relative to 2019. So 40% more dangerous than 2019. Two might be at 2.2, which, not great, but is it better than it was when it was probably 15, homicides per 100,000 in 1970? Absolutely, yes. And I think it's important to kind of acknowledge that there are issues and that crime could be improved upon, or that cities could be safer, while also acknowledging that over the last decades, the body of work, American cities generally have gotten much safer.
Yeah, I mean the crime is a thing that scares everyone, but when it comes to the metro areas that we live in, that's just a small factor in the amounts of injuries and deaths that occur,
Yeah.
largely from mobility. So,
Yeah.
bringing us back a little bit, is there is there so what does this mean for you specifically? Clearly you're saying you would like to have a more urban kind of environment for your family. um, how would that look?
Yeah. It's a good question, and it's a profound question, because there's no easy answers. I mean, obviously, you know, as we do in our careers, in our lives, we kind of have to go where the job is, wherever that happens to be, and kind of fit that into what we like in a place. So I think I'd like to be somewhere that is more walkable and has that kind of urban component to it. I'd like to be somewhere that's maybe a little less flat than where I'm at now, which is probably pretty much every other place that exists out there. But as far as actually getting there, I mean, I think it's just a matter of making that kind of leap and looking around at what's out there to see where, we could potentially go from here.
Yeah, okay. I know I'm kind of digging into your maybe some private stuff that you weren't uh,
No, I understand.
on,
Yeah.
but I'm just trying to get at the fact that I noticed when you came back from this trip that you were just seemed so profoundly impacted by it. It was kind of like the sort of an epiphany that this was really, it was almost like a kick in the butt for you, that uh, there's a life in a world that you really want that's not exactly where you're at right now.
Yeah.
And I feel you, because I tend to be sort of a complacent person where I'm perfectly happy, perfectly content, I should say, with most things that happen in my life. And so it's easy for me to then just become complacent about that. And it seems like, you also are quite happy with where you've been living, and so forth. But then it would take something really profound for you to realize, actually, there's something much better that I think for me and for you is just a better fit. So
Yeah.
that's what I was trying to get at,
Yeah.
was how impactful it seemed.
No, it was. And I think what it was that was different from different previous trips was, on previous trips, I've been so focused on kind of getting around to all the sites. And even in Tokyo, which should be impossible to do that in 2 months, I was really trying. Obviously, I think my favorite part of that Tokyo trip still was navigating around the metro network there. But I was trying to get to places. And yes, I was, like, I saw a few new things I hadn't seen, but really I was just happy to just be in both of these places I visited this summer, and really just kind of be present in that moment. And so that was what made me think beyond just just there's a comfort there, so that was like, it felt
Mhm.
very much like not something I'm just figuring out as a tourist, but something that I'd feel okay advising other tourists on how to do and how to navigate the metro network. So that was, I think, a big change for me.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, yeah, but part of me asking you these questions is also that I very much empathize. I've had a lot of these same feelings over the past month from our travels. I've
Yeah,
spoken with a lot of friends, parents as well, maybe older parents with older kids, and tried to pick their brains on their thoughts and reflection of raising kids in big cities.
yeah,
And had a lot of that same kind of topic of having independent kids who can get around sort of street
yeah,
smarts in a city, and understanding that that there's pros and cons, but
yeah,
certainly you come away a bit more mature, a bit more independent, and and so that's been something I've thought about. I've also had the same thought that I've been very happy in Florida. Of course,
yeah,
we're about to embark on a new journey, or we have already started that. So Florida is no longer the home.
yeah,
But prior to that, I was perfectly happy being in Florida all those years. But now I'm realizing there are places that I might. It's not just about wanting to travel and see new places, but there are actually places that I might be happier um,
yeah,
being in as a long-term base than where I have been. So
right.
yeah, so both of those things have kind of struck me as I'm projecting onto you, but
No, and no, but it's valid, and I think just just the entire way, like it's almost like taking the blue pill in the Matrix. I mean, once you've actually done it, and you aren't just one of, like, like that, just engage with things on the day to day, and you actually see what it's like to just be there. It really, it changes you, and it makes you think about what, yeah, like I mean, am I guaranteed to actually like it if I'm full-time existing in an urban space? I don't know. I don't think people are there 100% happy all the time. There's problems like everywhere else, but it makes you want to see what is on the other side of the, what that looks like.
yeah, yeah, no, definitely. There's an element of grass is greener, where you see like the good things, and you may overemphasize those, and you may not see all the difficulties. Especially, oftentimes it's much higher cost of living that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Um, but but yeah, I mean, if you take it in total, and consider all the factors, uh, I think oftentimes we'll serve ourselves better to go where we're truly happy.
Yes.
I guess I don't want to I don't want to
No.
downplay Florida. We're both from Florida, or
Yeah. Yeah.
for a long time.
Well, and I think it's not just one simple thing either. I mean, obviously, this is getting, probably off track from the initial
Yeah,
topic for sure. But just like, I went on a walk with my daughter today, midday, and it was just like, I got back in, and I mean, I put her down, and I had to take a nap for an hour. It was just like, gosh, like it. I don't think humans, or at least me, were made to be where it's that hot and that relentless. And that even, I think, speaks to the ecosystem of the city, because when we go often to Water Street in Tampa, which is kind of a ritzy new district there in the waterfront, and we find, like, we go in one building and out another, and there's an urban canyon that's granting shade, there's the Publix that we can walk into, there's an aquarium we can walk into right there, and that business density seems to even kind of solve the climate equation
mhm,
problem, like, because
mhm.
you're not, if you don't want to, you're not spending as much time in intense heat or intense cold.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, if you add up all the major urban centers, you get more than half of the world's population. They must have a reason for surviving in those places. So
Yeah, yeah,
um, yeah, well, that was cool. Any
yes.
parting thoughts?
I think just I would encourage anyone to, even if it's just for a few days, to kind of get out and see these different places. I mean, I know that's not something that we necessarily all have the luxury of getting on a plane necessarily or going abroad or whatever, but even just like, the Boston flight for us was relatively, I mean, it was like 150 round trip to get to Boston and really be in what felt almost like an entirely different continent. And even just going like when Alex and Harper and I will go to Miami and maybe stay in a place that's walkable like Brickell for a couple nights and stuff. And I think I would encourage anyone to really try that, because it's when you travel, yes, it's cool to like see places and relax and have a vacation, but you can almost kind of take it as a trial living. This is something that Brendan Francis Noonan mentioned on his Not Lost podcast, actually. And he said, basically he sees some of the new places or has that he's visited as kind of like trying out like a rental, like a Blockbuster Video, where you get like 4 days and you're in a new place and you're engaging with what that is like. And I think even if we decide, okay, yeah, we like whatever our current existence is, it's healthy to see what other people might live like.
Yeah. Totally. And shout out to like the new podcast, Not Lost.
It's great. Are you through season one, all of season 1 too?
Yeah.
Because I know I am. Yeah.
So it's a great podcast that kind of does what you and I often enjoy, which is to experience new cities through the lens of a local or locals, and feel do what you were just saying. Imagine
life there. Yeah.
So cool. All right. Well, we'll wrap up, and next time I guess we'll try to talk about my recent trip on the West Coast, where I had some similar vibes to you.
Well, thanks for everyone for joining in on us, and I hope that you have a happy Independence Day, or if you've seen this after the Independence Day is over, I hope you have an awesome remainder of the summer, and hopefully you have some cool travel plans ahead.
Yep. Bye-bye.